Good morning, everyone. I'm Mayor Lauren McLean. Welcome to today's keynote address. It's an honor to introduce Pat Mitchell, a pioneer in journalism and media, and for women worldwide. Pat has won 37 Emmy Awards and 5 Peabodys for her work as a journalist and media executive. She was the first woman to host a national television show created entirely by women. In fact, she's paved the way for women and professionals everywhere. These are just some of the accomplishments she was the first woman to achieve. President of CNN Productions, first female president of PBS, and the first journalist to get Fidel Castro on camera, stating that there were warheads aimed at the United States. Pat has traveled the world to report the stories of women on the front lines of conflict and peacemaking. After an accomplished career in media, leveraging her position to elevate other women, she's now focused on connecting women leaders to optimize the power of women working together. Today, Pat is the editorial director of TEDWomen, chair of the Women's Media Center and Sundance Institute boards, founding member of VDA Global Movement to End Violence Against Women, and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Pat currently lives in Atlanta and New York, but mainly on airplanes, with her husband, Scott. Together, they have 6 children and 13 grandchildren. And now we all have the opportunity to delve into her extraordinary life and accomplishments. Her book, Becoming a Dangerous Woman, Embracing Risk to Change the World, published in October 2019, offers insights into her life and the life of other accomplished women, including director Ava DuVernay, journalist Christiane Amanpour, Democratic leader Stacey Abrams, activist and scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, and many others. Be sure to pick up a copy for yourself in the Boise State University bookstore virtual booth in the expo hall. And as a reminder, you can post any questions in the chat, which will be answered during the live Q&A session. So without further delay, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Pat Mitchell.
Greetings, dangerous women leaders at the Andrus Women's Leadership Conference. Now, if that description makes you a little uncomfortable, I understand. Truthfully, declaring myself a dangerous woman and making it the title of my book was stepping outside my comfort zone, and I resisted it for some time. But at 77, with nothing left to prove, less to lose, and very impatient for a more just, equitable, and sustainable world, I took the risk, realizing that so many of the barriers that I had faced in my journey from a small town Georgia town with no money or influence to leadership positions in media, those barriers were still present for women seeking leadership today. The challenges of being the first or the only woman, working twice as hard and making half as much, struggling to be fully present as a parent and at work, negotiating failures, disappointments, all still present for women seeking to be leaders today. So I decided it was time to be braver, bolder, and yes, dangerous, and to encourage other women to become more dangerous too, because dangerous times call for dangerous women. So let me define further what I mean by dangerous. I don't mean becoming someone to be feared, but I do mean becoming more fearless. I mean speaking the truth when silence is safer. I mean speaking up about who isn't present or represented. And I mean showing up as women for each other, as supporters, advocates, champions, mentors, friends, allies. Yes, that describes a dangerous woman, and is, in my opinion, exactly the kind of leader that we need to meet the challenges of these dangerous times. And can there be any doubt that we are living in dangerous times? Starting with the reality of how we're connecting today. And yes, I am missing the pleasures of actually being together. There is a certain magic alchemy, really, that happens when women come together and listen and learn from each other, connect around shared experiences, meet new friends, create new networks, build, strengthen our alliances and allies. And we need our allies. including good men, and I want to acknowledge one such man today. He is, I believe, the only man ever invited to speak at this Women's Leadership Conference. Scott Anderson, CEO of Zions Bank. It's been my experience that when there is an opportunity to promote, advocate, champion, or celebrate women, Scott Anderson is there, usually behind the scenes and never expecting the praise, which I'm giving and I'm sure will embarrass him. But I want to acknowledge that it was Scott Anderson who mentioned this leadership forum to me, assuring me that there were plenty of women leaders in Boise just waiting to become more dangerous. And he encouraged me to show up to share some of what I've learned about leading as a woman and for women. Now, the first lesson of leadership is showing up, which you have done today. To connect virtually and in person, to learn from each other's experiences and stories, as we have always done as women. In earlier times, maybe around campfires or in talking circles, but passing our knowledge generation to generation to today's forum, where we connect through innovation, technology, platforms that allow us to extend our impact to unparalleled reach. And for the past several months, the impact of living in this kind of interconnected global community has certainly not been entirely positive. An invisible and deadly microbe has revealed conclusively that what happens in one part of the world can impact life in every part of the world. The coronavirus knows no borders, and tragically, its force has been felt most adversely in communities already vulnerable to other global challenges. Access to good health care, experiencing the natural catastrophes of climate change, to economic and food insecurity. And in every community, it has been the caregivers, the largest percentage of which are women in every community, who have sacrificed their own safety and well-being to be on the front lines of a global pandemic that has shifted everything about the way we live and work. There is no longer a normal anywhere. And the question for leaders everywhere is, how do we lead in a time of fear and contagion and uncertainty? How do we make decisions quickly and with good advice? How to inspire confidence? How to communicate new ways forward from these dangerous times? As someone once said about dangerous times like these, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. That means for me that in crisis, there are opportunities to step up, stand up, and show up as the kind of leaders who can be decisive, inspire confidence, seek consensus, who know how to listen and who to listen to, and who are willing to take the risk to create necessary changes. In other words, women leaders prepared to be as dangerous as we need to be to meet the challenges of dangerous times. And this global pandemic has yielded some real-time evidence that women leaders, leading as women, calling on some of their natural attributes and their lived experiences as women, are just right for these dangerous times. Because in these times, the 8 countries declared the safest place to live during the pandemic are the 8 countries whose leaders are women. Let's take a closer look at the leadership lessons that we can find in the actions of some of these leaders. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's young and hugely popular leader, shared recently that before instituting one of the earliest pandemic lockdowns, she called in the Maori elders. She wanted to hear the wisdom of the indigenous leaders in her country, and then weaving their wisdom with opposing points of views about what actions were necessary, she quite literally wove together her plan, taking many of the ideas from a listening tour. And then, from her baby's bedroom, wearing casual workout clothes, she announced her plan to the country and made it clear while staying relaxed and casual so as not to provoke more fear that there would be no exceptions or exemptions from compliance. And remember too, this is the same woman leader who faced another crisis as prime minister, a tragic shooting at a mosque. And within 48 hours, Ahern had struck down the country's existing gun laws. For me, she exemplifies a compassionate, competent, courageous leader, just what you need in a crisis. I also like to remind people that she ran for prime minister while she was pregnant, and right after the birth, modeled a new kind of leader by taking the generous family leave policy offered to all of New Zealand's mothers and fathers. Now, Germany's Angela Merkel exemplifies a very different kind of leader. Herself a scientist, she did a lot of deep listening, mostly to scientists, and not to the politicians who cautioned her not to move so quickly. With a much larger, much more diverse population than New Zealand and even Taiwan, which is also led by a woman and an early COVID success story, Merkel believed in the importance of widespread and early testing. And in the first month, she put into place the largest coronavirus testing program in all of Europe. And she stood strong against the economic leaders who opposed her lockdown policies. As a result, Germany's death rate from the virus remains very low in comparison to its neighboring European countries, and certainly lower than the UK and the US, which are regrettably examples of leaders who refuse to listen to the scientists, or even to their own advisors. The Nordic countries, where women as leaders is much more the norm than in any other part of the world, also intervened early and with large-scale contact tracing and quarantines. The youngest woman leader among them, Finland's Sanna Marin, communicated her pandemic policies every day by using social media. She wanted to keep her population informed and compliant. Now, all of the Nordic countries, except for Sweden, are almost virus-free. Sweden is a notable exemption in the region as the only country led by a man and the only one who didn't institute an economic lockdown or widespread testing. And the outcome was more COVID cases and deaths. Now, given how few women are actually leading countries, it's less than 7% of the world's leaders, and women are less than 25% of the world's governing bodies, it's really too early to conclude that more women leaders in government would create safer, healthier, more sustainable countries. But the evidence is mounting as this pandemic seems to magnify the best and the worst ways to lead in crisis. And there's some more women leaders who exemplify the best. In my hometown, Atlanta's courageous Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms had to fight with the governor over a mandatory mask, but she never wavered, even when he took her to court. And Mayor Bowser of DC had to take the fight to protect her community all the way to the White House. And women governors like Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, she faced opposition inside and outside her state. And her health minister, also a woman, resigned after being threatened in her home by citizens carrying guns demanding her resignation. As I said, crises do bring out the best and the worst, and it is the leaders who define ultimately what direction their city, their company, their government will take. And in dangerous times, we're seeing more of these women leaders become as brave, bold, and yes, dangerous as they need to be to meet the challenges of an unprecedented global pandemic. Not without fear, I'm sure, but with a kind of fearlessness that is coming now from relying on some of our innate values and our lived experiences that are part of being a woman. In past years, there have been a sort of widespread acceptance that many of these very attributes are exactly what's needed for 21st century leadership. There have been a lot of those research studies that pointed to the positive impacts when women lead companies. Among those positive impacts, better bottom lines when there are more women in management and on corporate boards. Better customer relations when workforces are more inclusive and representative. And research showing that when women are in government, there is a different set of priorities and policies. So yes, there has been conclusive data before about the positive impact when companies and countries are more inclusive. So not only do women leaders tend to build and bring in more inclusive teams, it seems they're beginning to trust the very qualities that were often dismissed or criticized as feminine. No longer it's so easily to dismiss or discourage because those very natural attributes are proving to be the very qualities needed most, especially in difficult times. What are some of those qualities? Qualities that social scientists document as qualities needed for transformational leadership. A natural inclination to listen, to build coalitions and alliances, to seek consensus but not be afraid to compromise, to be compassionate and caring while strategic and strong, and to make big decisions early and to stick with them. Attributes that are being touted as exactly the leadership qualities needed in the 21st century for companies and countries. Another attribute, by the way, often mentioned when describing female leadership is effective leaders have an ability to communicate, and women communicate well. I'd like to cite the example of the communication recently by the Prime Minister of St. Martin, a tiny Caribbean island. She released a no-nonsense video about her lockdown plans and said on radio, "If you don't understand my order, let me make it clear. Stop moving. If you don't have the bread you like in your house, eat crackers. If you don't have the crackers, eat cereal." Doesn't that sound just like a mother? Yes, many of the characteristics that we call upon as mothers, wives, grandmothers, are the very ones that can serve us well as leaders. Far too often, though, we have denied them to fit someone else's definition of a leader. In fact, when I was first starting out in television as one of the first or only women at a network, we were told never to bring up our roles as wives or mothers. Sometimes that meant making unsatisfactory choices between responsibilities at work and at home, and leaving us feeling unsuccessful as mothers and in our careers. U.S. businesses have a long way to go to fully recognize, respect, and accommodate parenting into the workplace policies. And that is one big reset that is going to emerge from this pandemic from women. Working mothers and fathers now having to balance childcare, homeschooling, and being on Zoom or Hop-In or some virtual platform to stay connected at work are realizing the challenge. And many women are saying they're not going to return to the office even when possible and safe. And many are realizing the workplace has got to be fixed. Business has got to be fixed to offer a better balance between parenting and professional pursuits. I believe that will happen when women are leading more companies and making policy, passing laws, and modeling that, yes, we can have it all as long as we have supportive systems at work and shared responsibilities at home. Now, if I'd been married to the man I'm married to now, I might have become the U.S. Senator I dreamed of being as a little girl, even though I'm not sure there were women senators when I was a little girl, but I wanted to be the first. I was counseled to pursue teaching, a respectable and stable occupation, and I loved it. But my curiosity about the world led me to journalism and television and to breaking a lot of barriers for myself and other women. And a lot of time in those early days wasted protecting our turf. Since we were told there could only be one of us in a newsroom or one of us in a top job, we were kept down by being kept apart, by connecting, comparing, and competing, using a lot of energy, working twice as hard to prove we could do the same jobs as men, but being paid less. All of those are still challenges, and it is up to women leaders to change that and more. And the change will begin when we stop trying to change ourselves. We don't need fixing. Businesses and governments need fixing. And we've got the lived experiences and the natural attributes to help them fix and lead through these needed changes. After all, who knows more about the daily challenges to authority than a parent? Who has to be more flexible and adapt to changes and challenges than anyone who has ever had a 2-year-old or been around one? Parenting is a good training for leadership, and we need the balance of male and female perspectives. So this is not about women being naturally better suited to lead and therefore win in the leadership game. Male leaders can be as compassionate and caring as women, and we can all name women leaders who have adapted the worst stereotypes of male leadership when they come into power. So isn't it time to put aside all of those stereotypes and let women become leaders, leading as women, recognizing that women aren't monolithic, and there will be women leaders who will follow the current power paradigm. And let's acknowledge that some people with power are going to hold on to it at all cost. So what is needed then is a shift in the power paradigm. And we do that by showing what power leadership looks like and acts like. And we do this if we commit as leaders to speaking out against injustice whenever we see it or experience it, speaking up for those who are not present or represented, and most importantly, showing up for one another. It is our most dangerous act. If we step up to leadership and we get it, we drop the ladder for those who are coming behind. We advocate, promote, and hire other women. But be prepared, as an advocate for other women, to hear this. You're playing the woman's card. I would often hear that when recommending a woman for a corporate board seat or hiring a woman. And when I would advocate for a person of color for a promotion or a hire, I would hear, oh, you're playing the race card. Well, as a newly declared dangerous woman who is impatient for better representation everywhere, my advice is we play all the cards. Men have been successfully playing the cards for a long-standing network of friends and allies. That's why often there are more men named John on a search firm's candidate list than there are women of color. Well, I hope I've convinced you that it's your time for your name to be on those lists of potential leaders. And it's your time to become as brave, bold, and as dangerous as you need to be. Just step into your power and move forward toward your personal goals, remembering to take other women with you. To move forward as leaders, to create workplaces that look more like our communities, to create cultures that value, respect, and engage differences for the positive contributions they do. Differences are our teachers. We're ready for all this. We're better prepared than any generation of women who have lived before. We're better educated, better connected, and we have more role models of what dangerous looks like. Dangerous women can be found now at each end of the age spectrum, from teenage Greta Thunberg and all those climate strikers she inspired, to Jane Fonda, who at 82, still on the front lines, defining a truly activist leader. Becoming dangerous isn't about being a certain age, but it is about getting into the struggle. You can't be dangerous from the sidelines. You've got to jump in, get involved, engage, commit to taking risk and being as fearless as the world needs us to be. It is about claiming your power It is about optimizing your spheres of influence, and it is mostly about making a difference by being a different kind of leader. I was inspired to believe that this was possible, to be a different kind of leader, to be a different kind of boss, to be a woman leader who led as a woman and for women, when I heard Congresswoman from New York, Bella Abzug, proclaim, in the 20th century, women will change the nature of power rather than power changing the nature of women. It's now the 21st century, and we are the ones who can once and for all do this. We can change power by how we use it as leaders, how we share it to improve the lives of others, and how we change the prevailing power paradigm by changing the numbers of women who have power. That's how we lead. That's how we lead for a reset that this pandemic pause in our lives gives us the opportunity to create. And I believe that reset will come when women step into our power, envision a different future, and lead towards it. Arundhati Roy, a well-known writer and dangerous woman leader in India, articulated the opportunity of these dangerous times when she wrote, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one's no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead seas, our dead rivers and smoky skies. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. I believe we're ready to take up that fight, to confront the challenges, to offer new ideas and propose new solutions. We will be the leaders for climate justice, for full equality across the board everywhere, from representation in all decision-making rooms to the top jobs in business, arts, culture, education. We will be ready to come together for the kind of collective problem solving that we as women leaders can do and must do together. It is up to us to leave the baggage of systemic racism and sexism that denies opportunities on the basis of sex or skin color or country of origin. It is up to us to travel lightly into less dangerous times by traveling together. So let's keep moving forward, respecting the struggles of those who were on the front lines before, fighting for our right to vote, to own property, to have bank accounts in our own names, to have the right to choose when or if to have children, to pursue our dreams and realize our potential, to be as dangerous as we need to be, as fearless as the fight requires us to be, to create the changes we want to see in our communities, our companies, our world. On that call to action, one final inspiring verse that sits on my computer so I can reflect on why I do what I do. It's from George Bernard Shaw. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me, but a splendid torch that I have got hold of for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before passing it on to future generations. I'm not passing my torch, but I am hoping I've ignited yours to become a woman leader, to lead as a woman and for women, because together we create a dangerous light that will lead forward from dangerous times to a more just, sustainable, and equitable world. Thank you. 。
Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have this opportunity to have questions with Pat. Hopefully we're live now. And I think one of the first questions that we received that you may want to address, Pat, is what your shirt says.
Well, let's see if I can show you.
Okay.
Well, not quite. It says, ready for risk, impatient for change.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Wonderful shirt choice.
Well, that describes me, and I think that describes probably everyone who's with us today, because aren't we all ready to take some risk if it leads to positive change?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know our audience has just really enjoyed your keynote address, and there's been some really meaningful questions that have been put forward. And in the essence of time, because we only have 20 minutes, I'd love to get started. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with the first question we have on the docket, which is, you say that showing up for one another is our most dangerous and culture shifting act as a woman. Can you share examples of this act in action?
Many times in my career and certainly in my life, having other women show up as a mentor, an advocate, a champion has been transformational. And I could give you examples of early on in the media career when we were encouraged not to show up for each other. When we began to do that, the whole face of television started to change as women said, no, this is what's important to us, and stood behind each other. And then there were the times when looking for a promotion or for an idea to go forward, and having women step up and support each other made it happen. And then for me, one of the most important ways that I put this into action in my own life was when I would get to a top position, my first president's job or CEO job, the first thing I would try and do was to look at the pipeline of women leaders and see where were the opportunities to promote or to advocate, and not to the expense of other qualified candidates, but just insisting that these women got their chance at the promotion or the position they were applying for. So in each one of my jobs, I tried to prepare a woman to take my place when I left. So that's one way. And then I can look at a much broader scale of elections and campaigns, and knowing how important the women's vote is, that when we show up at the polls and we vote for other women, we elect more women to representative places in our government, state, local, national, and it's made a difference. So I do think I describe it as a dangerous act only because it's probably the biggest thing we can do to shift culture, to shift the power paradigm, to actually have ourselves and our needs and represented in the policies that affect us and our families.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you talked about the elections. One of the questions that we have addresses that specifically. You know, more women are running for office than ever before this year. Why, and this being in your opinion, how confident are you that more women will win these elections?
I'm hopeful, and I'm getting more confident every day, actually. I started a social media campaign a couple of weeks ago called Woman Up, which is, again, the same idea of woman up, meaning we're stepping up, we're speaking up, and we're showing up in greater numbers. And not just about a numbers game, but about what a difference it makes when our voices are represented at every table. And I also saw a study just yesterday from the Gates Foundation indicating that women are starting to be less judgmental about other women running for political office. The press is starting to be somewhat more equal in their treatment of men and women candidates. So some of the barriers are coming down. Not all. There are still barriers to women candidates getting the same treatment from the press. But I'm getting more confident every day. Simply in terms of numbers, we are going to have more women representing us at every level of government.
Yeah, that's exciting. Very exciting. And really, Pat, you're a woman that represents fearless women. And it's a wonderful thing to see it in action and to share that knowledge with us, with your audience, with the world, really. And one of the questions that we have is, in becoming a dangerous woman and fearless, how does that play out in your life and work now?
When I reflect back on my life, which I had to do in order to write the book, I realized that there had been fearless many times. If fearless is it means taking risk and big risk, and I did that because I think at the time I wasn't considering fearlessness as much as absolute necessity to move to the next step or to take the next job or whatever. There were always risks. So I think I had to experience a kind of fearlessness over and over again. But it took me longer than I wish it had to exercise what I describe now as what it means to be dangerous, to meet the challenges of dangerous times. I wish there had been earlier times in my career that I spoke up against injustice or sexual harassment. Are many of the other barriers that we are still regrettably facing. I wish there had been times when I had spoken up about the lack of representation in a room in a stronger and clearer way, calling for action that would change that representation. So the reason I wrote the book and went so far as to declare myself dangerous was that, yes, I'm doing that every day. And yes, I've done it before, but now is the time where there is an urgency because of the dangers we are dealing with and the challenges that still face women seeking to fulfill their greatest potential and girls everywhere. We're going to have to be fearless. We're going to have to take risk. And for me, it's playing out every day now at a different level, perhaps, of commitment to being as dangerous as I have to be to bring about the changes I know are needed for a more just world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our audience is curious to hear from you how others have reacted to this, that momentum and your dangerous years and how you felt differently. How did other people react to that? What can our audience expect in their journey of becoming a dangerous woman? Reactions?
Well, when I first declared it in that meeting that day in 2017, a lot of my friends went, "Ooh, well, that's going a little bit far, don't you think?" Whereas others that I admire greatly and the choices they've made in their lives, others encourage me to do that. To just go ahead, get out there, name it something that will give everybody a rallying cry. My family, my children, my grandchildren were a little more hesitant about, you really want to do that? You want to go all the way out and say, the call is for us to become as dangerous as we need to be. And then interestingly enough, over just the last couple of years, as the fears have intensified about how much on the edge we are in terms of a planet that will be sustainable, in terms of equal access to economic and racial equity across the board, the more people, I believe, are seeing that dangerous is probably the path, a path that is going to call on us all to just be a lot braver, a lot bolder. The time is running out on all of the urgent threats to our planet and to our equal opportunities as women and girls. So I made the call. I'm glad I made it. I now live with that moniker. I'm often called, oh, here comes the dangerous woman. But I think,
and that's a compliment.
Yeah, but AOC, Alexandria Cortez-Ocasio, when she stood up and made that speech on the floor of the House, and she used the word dangerous, it made me realize how it is used so often to describe any woman who is stepping out of a stereotyped expected pattern or pathway and carving a new way forward for herself and others. Dangerous is a way of sort of holding us back by using those kind of words as threats almost. And so it's time to claim it in the way that it's time to claim power, not in the way we have it exemplified in many of the leaders today, but in the way we can define it and change it. So I'm trying to change the word dangerous to mean something really good, really powerful, really about change.
I love it. Thank you, Pat. And you know, we can't have a conversation about dangerous women without bringing men into the conversation to some extent, right? So what advice or perspective do you have for the men in the room to be better advocates for women and promote these changes?
Actually, we can't do any of it without men as our allies and supporters. We can make the personal decisions, and we must, to be as fearless as we need to be. But in order to put fearlessness and dangerous risk-taking into action, we need our allies. We must have our allies. And in so many times in my life, making that next big, bold step was empowered by a man who supported, who mentored, who advocated. And I have never seen the power game as a win or lose. And unfortunately, that's the way it's been presented. If women advance, men don't. If women win, men lose. That definition of power will keep us all held back from our fullest potential. But seeing it as a win-win for everyone, which is clearly the win for the world when men and women step up together and do make the policies and take the actions that make it possible for every girl and every boy to realize their dreams and their fullest potential. That's the win, and that's the win that will take men and women working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the questions that I really do want to bring to light here is sharing a story, your own story, if you will, of a moment of leadership where you were knocked down and you got back up, and what that, your stories are powerful, and we want to hear from you.
Well, there have been several times when I felt that getting back up to move forward, as my grandmother always told me I would do after falling, seemed impossible. And one of them was when I lost my own show, which also meant my own company. I'd created a company of women partners. We had a program on the air that had meaning to women. We were excited about what changes we were bringing about, and then it ended quite suddenly and quite unfairly. And in a way we had no ability to shift. That time took me back. I had to step back and really think about what I was willing to fight for and where I would take my next step. So during those, I don't know, what particular thing happens that reignites, but it's having that purpose and that passion and just knowing that you have to find it again. And it happened a couple of other times when things just didn't work out the way they should. I would keep that in my head about failing, that there really is no success without the experience of failure. And however we may describe failure or feel about it, you have to experience it to know how strong you really are, how purposeful you really can be, and then reconnect to that passion that got you to that place the first time. So I thank my grandmother, actually, Danielle, every time, because I hear her voice in my head going, you may have fallen, but that was at least a forward move.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's amazing how we can really be there for each other, which brings me to my question. One of our audience members says we often see or hear about women being harder on other women or holding down other women. Best advice for mentoring and lifting each other up? we'd like to hear your best advice, Pat.
Well, the best advice is don't be that woman. Don't be the woman who gets described as the worst boss I ever had. And I hear that at almost every women's gathering. Someone will say, a woman was my worst boss. Don't be that boss. We have the ability to take power and change the way it is used by sharing it. So that's my advice. When you get power, influence, position, share it. Look behind. Reach down and take the hand of the woman coming behind. Give the advice that you wish someone had given you. Make room for other women.
Other dangerous women, huh, Pat?
Yes, other dangerous women.
Love that. Okay, another advice question. Could you share some advice on your work-life balance and how to really navigate that? You're so successful in so many ways, and you have a beautiful family as well. So please share.
This is always the hardest question for me. And it is that question that I mentioned in my talk, that I really think we spend all our lives trying to fix that balance, when it would be great if businesses helped us by fixing the family policies. I never really felt I had work-life balance. I was a single parent raising a son. And I always felt like I was not where he needed me to be. And often I was not where my work required me to be. There was always that feeling of failure and conflict. And part of that was because the business I was in, television at the time, had no policies that recognized mothers were parents too. Gratefully, that has changed to some degree, but not entirely. So for me, the conflict was real and lasting. And it took me a long time to forgive myself, actually, for the times that I wasn't at the soccer game, or I was late to the teacher's appointment. Many times I had to make those choices. And where I think we can make a difference now is that every time I stepped into a leadership position, the first thing I looked at were what were the policies the company had regarding maternity and paternity leave. What policies did we put into place to make it easier for parents to balance work and life? And now with this pandemic, Danielle, we're all experiencing a whole nother definition of that, as mothers are homeschooling as well as trying to continue full-time work. And I fear a lot of women probably won't return to the same routines. And that's not on us to fix, except as leaders when we have an opportunity to fix it. And I've seen that happen when women leaders step forward and say this, and it's hard because you'll always think, oh, there goes the woman complaining again, or somehow it always comes back to us, right? The mothers. And in fact, good family policy is great for mothers and fathers, as we know. At NBC, when we finally got family leave, the first people to take it were fathers, which was, hugely encouraging. So work on family policy, work on laws too, that protect this and make it possible for us to have fulfilled and satisfying lives. My stepchildren, who most of whom were well on their way when I came into their picture, but one wasn't, gave me an opportunity to be a different kind of engaged and present parent. So I am grateful for that. And now my grandparents and my grandchildren are giving me yet another opportunity to feel the satisfaction and joy of grandparenting and parenting. And I want every parent to be able to feel that full engagement as a parent and full satisfaction for the career paths that we have chosen. They should not be divergent, but aligned pathways in our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that, just having the grace for understanding that when we navigate our careers and our families, that we need to be patient with ourselves just as much as we're with each other.
Yeah, my son finally said to me, Danielle, why don't you just go ahead and forgive yourself for those few times, because I did it a long time ago.
Yeah, right. It's a beautiful thing about family. So we're getting close to the time that we need to move on. And I really want to make sure that you have an opportunity, Pat, to share with our audience. We have over 1,200 people that have attended this conference, and they've heard from a great many speakers on different topics. And yours is just so inspiring. And I just want to, if there's something you would like as a takeaway for our audience today, I'd love for you to share that.
Thank you, Danielle, for this opportunity and for inviting me to be a part of this conference. To think that there are 1,200 women and men who have taken the time out of their lives to make this decision to participate in this conference already says something extremely hopeful to me. Because I do find there is a certain kind of alchemy that happens when we come together as committed women and as the men who support us, that something happens in our convenings, whether they're virtual like this or gratefully one day again soon in person. We need to be connected. Women in particular need that connection to share learning, to share stories, to help each other survive and thrive. And we need that now as a global community in a way we've never needed it more. And I have always had enormous faith that it will be women coming into their own full realization of ourselves and what we bring to every leadership opportunity that will lead the world forward. So I am looking at these 1,200 people, hoping that one or two words of inspiration as well as skill building that you've gained during this leadership conference will give you whatever you need to be a transformative change leader, because that's what the world needs.
Absolutely. And that's why they're here, right? That's the momentum. That's why our audience has joined us today. Well, Pat, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and for answering our questions today. It's been really wonderful having you and very meaningful as well. So thank you for your time, and we hope that we get to connect with you again soon.
Thank you very much, Danielle. I will be there in person with an invitation.
We welcome you. Boise, Idaho would love that.
I would love to.
Thank you.